good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. Thank you for tuning in for our presentation. As Stephanie said, it follows on quite nicely from Hong's presentation about awards management. This presentation gives you a run through of what it's like to go live with a new module during a pandemic. We thought that might be quite an interesting topic for everybody to hear about, because obviously things are challenging anyway. Why not make them harder for ourselves? So just by way of introductions, my name's Laura Turner. I manage our Pure instance at the University of Manchester in the UK. And I'm joined today by my colleague Lita Denny, who's Head of Research Services at the University of Manchester as well. Before I press on with the presentation, I should probably just give a little bit of an explanation for why the slides look like they do. For anybody tuning in who has been fortunate enough to come to conferences in previous years, you'll know that when Lita and I are allowed to speak, we do love a musical theme. So we've done the Rolling Stones. Last year in Prague, we did ABBA. So we thought, why not keep on with the same theme this year? And we thought we'd bring a little bit of American glamour to our presentation, given that we can't be in Miami today, unfortunately. So just to explain why Elvis features so much on these slides. Okay, so a little bit of background about where we were at. So again, for anybody here that was fortunate enough to be in Prague last year, you'll know that Lita and I spoke about awards management and about our implementation at Manchester. And obviously that was October last year, and then obviously the world changed quite drastically at the start of 2020, and as I imagine is the same in your institutions, there was a huge push to do everything online. Our campus closed, so all our processes had to be moved online. So we were almost ready to go live with awards management. We'd just not quite pressed the final buttons when our director of research gave us a hard deadline of July. He said, you've got to go live with this thing if you're ever going to do it. So there's nothing like a hard deadline to focus minds. So we've pretty much dropped everything else and focused on awards management. And again, as it says there, it was really focused on really influenced by our move to online processes. We had to do something, so now was the time to do it. At Manchester, prior to our implementation of awards management, a lot of our approvals for applications and awards were paper-based. So everybody was sent home, back to their home offices, and obviously paper-based processes were just not going to work. So this was a real big driver for us in July time. We were fortunate, however, that a lot of the legwork for moving to awards management had been done. We'd moved all of our legacy data from our old bespoke grant management system, and that was a huge amount of data that had already been done. And we'd also migrated our documents as well. The next big challenge that we had was to reach everybody at home. So our user base for awards management is around about 150 users. So we had to reach those, we had to train them, and we had to sort of understand everybody's home office arrangements and understand the best way that we could train them. So a little less conversation, a little more action. What did we do? So the big challenge for us was user setup. We have a lot of users at Manchester. It's a devolved setup that we have. So we had to get all our users set up, and we had to finally agree on our configuration. So Hong touched a bit about how you can configure the workflow and how things are generally going to work in awards management. And we had to decide and do that and actually do that setup. And I think what I'd say on that for anybody looking to move towards awards management is that two heads are better than one. Some of the configuration takes a little bit of thinking about. So if you've got a team behind you, that's really helpful. One of the other big challenges that we had is that because we had so much legacy data of various different qualities, we had a number of data issues that we really needed to overcome before we went live. So just a quick shout out to both Mads and to Davina for your help with solving what was 20 years of data errors. So thanks, guys. And it was a challenge for us as well. So we had to quite quickly learn how to use new tools. So Zoom was pretty new to us. We used a tool called Articulate Storyline to deliver online training materials. We had to learn how to edit videos. It was all quite new and quite quick. And again, as Hong has touched on, one of the key things about awards management is its integration with other systems, and that's really important for us at Manchester because we process so much data and our volumes are so large that we really rely on really good integrations. So when we implemented awards management, it meant rebuilding an integration with our finance system, which is no small task, and also an integration with a new reporting tool that we had at Manchester as well. Okay, so a little bit about some of the things that we did. And I'm going to hand over to Lita now, just to give you a bit more background about approvals and workflow.
Hi. So as you can see, we'll be keeping with the Elvis theme, return to sender, or to drafter more appropriately, I think, in awards management. So approval workflow setup. It's quite daunting, I think, before you start down this road. And I think my best piece of advice is to keep it simple. It's very tempting to try and do something that is more sophisticated, perhaps, than what you already have. And the chances of you being able to achieve that in your first implementation of awards management are quite slim. So as Laura's written on these slides, you need lots of brain space and lots of coffee to configure your approval workflow. And when you bring into that the approver roles and the different types of editor and assistant editor roles in Pure, it can get very complex. So I think we said last year at Prague that we've kept our types of activity in Pure very simple. Things are either research or non-research, grants or contracts, and effectively our approval process follows that route. So some of the benefits, I think, that we've seen during the COVID pandemic, approvers can approve things anywhere. So whilst I wouldn't recommend you log into Pure on your phone, it is possible to do that, and we have had staff that have done that in order to approve an application. It's a much more transparent trail of who has been involved in something and when. And the thing that our teams have really taken to is the ability to send messages and make comments and put key pieces of information in the history and comments in Pure. Certainly for our research services team, that's been a real benefit. The upside is the records and the documents are now all in one system. And so we're really seeing, I guess, post-implementation, what we're seeing is Pure now being part of the conversation around transforming our processes in general. And so how can we use the system to make things more efficient and easier for staff to access? We've got a piece of work ongoing at the moment, which is working with our finance teams and our pre-award teams about which documents need to be in the system and how they're going to use that as part of the pre and post award handover. And prior to that, it was a very complex series of if you like, emails and spreadsheets and trackers and handovers and all the things that you might find in a sort of manual system. And staff have really taken to that and been really positive about it. And I heard the question in Chen's presentation around contracts and will there be a contracts management aspect to it. Whether we'll live to regret this or not, we are managing our contracts through Pure. And we have really only been able to achieve that through a rather creative use of keywords, managed keywords and tagging. Jury's still out a little bit because it requires staff to interact with the system and to remember to tag things. The bonus is that our research services teams and our PIs can see which contracts manager is working on their contract. And then we've also got a way for contracts managers to tag when things are out for review with the third party, out for review with the research services team, or perhaps with the PI, or whether they're in the process of looking at them. And on the whole, I think we're on a journey on that front. I mean, it's not a contracts management system Pure, and it's never going to be. But there are things that you can do with it that enhance that process and help you track that process a bit better. I mean, you'd pay over £1 million for a half decent legal system to manage your contractual negotiations, and that's absolutely not where Pure is. But if you're trying to manage the interface between all the constituent parties in terms of contracts, then absolutely it has some potential. Laura, next slide, please. So I'm all shook up. Big change for users. legacy system was around for 14 years plus. I think actually, and I don't know if anyone from Birmingham's on, possibly Karen, I think we bought it off Birmingham in 1992. So that's how long ago we'd had our previous pre-award system. And it had gone through various redesigns and polishes, etc. But essentially it was the same Oracle database, which had become hideously complex and difficult for people to use. And nobody outside research services could see it. So the big change is that information is now transparent to researchers, transparent to our business engagement team, transparent to our development and alumni offices. I mean, it's really kind of transformed our ability for people to use our application and award data. It is a new concept and there's a lot of functionality to understand. The project model can have you scratching your head. I'm by no means a data modeler, so I do struggle a little bit with those concepts, but to be frank, if I can get my head around it, then eventually anybody can. I think possibly one of the most mysterious aspects of Pure is the application and award relations. So you have to build these so that you can create different types of awards and applications and link them together. And as I say, as I said earlier, the types make it really tricky if you don't keep those types simple. If you've got lots of varying types, then your application and award relations will get very, very complex. It's complex enough just with 4. And what I would say is I spent an awful lot of time designing that and looking at that and building that. And then when it went live, stuff didn't work, so I just put the relations in. So I'm not sure I was actually ever really, how can I put it? I think it's meant to be a control mechanism, but what you'll find is that possibly things still don't work and you just have to build that relation anyway. So someone better than me would have to explain why we have that in Pure, but Davina's nodding, I can see off camera. So yeah, it is a tricky one, but it's critical because otherwise your data won't link together. Co-managing orgs, another shout out for the development team. We had a bit of a crisis quite close to go live, and Davina and the team really pulled out the stops, because basically what would happen is, because all the view and edit rights are based on the managing org, what we found was that staff that were collaborating on a project couldn't see it or couldn't see an application award. And so they created a co-managing organisation functionality in awards management, and that really does open up the ability to allow people to view data and see data. That, alongside the assisting editor, I think really we couldn't have gone live without those. So thank you, Davina, because I think I had one of my typical panicked emails where the development team don't hear from us for like 8 months, and then suddenly we come along with like 3 things and go, we can't go live. So yeah, that was a bit of an all shook up moment. Workflow steps as well. They are, and Elsevier won't be surprised for me to say this, they are quite rigid. So they do take you down a specific path. And we did try initially to do some more sophisticated workflow steps by tagging, using nature of activity to say that if something was a consultancy, it might go a different way. Actually, we found that didn't really work, and a lot of things didn't, kind of fell over if you've got a sort of multi-layered workflow step. And really, the parallel workflow is the work that needs to sort that out. I think there's lots of potential if we can get parallel workflows into awards management, because at the moment what we have is most of our stuff goes through the online workflow, but there's still a significant proportion, I'd say probably 30 or 40%, that because it's a different type of activity, is still an offline approval. And so we're kind of skipping over that workflow, and ideally we would like to get those things into Pure, things like approving your equipment and things like that. So milestones, we're starting on that journey. We see lots of potential, but we haven't yet kind of jumped into that because we're still very much in early life support and making sure that people can use the system. But to say that it's been a roaring success, it would not be an understatement. We are, I think Laura and I pinch ourselves that it went quite as well as it did, because it certainly was quite challenging to do it in the middle of everyone working from home. And I think just the final point for me is that exception reporting is important because people have been working at home and they have really taken to it. They are, of course, getting things wrong all the time. So, in fact, Laura's just built the exception reporting for us that we're going to start to circulate on a regular basis to stop people doing things like adding more than one principal investigator, forgetting to put the academic ownership in. And we get that we don't have those things as mandated because we try to keep the system open. But if you don't have good exception reporting, your data will be terrible. And so you do need to kind of buy into the notion of it being non-mandatory and transparent, but then the effort goes into making sure that users do the right thing, because most of the time they're not doing it wrong because they mean to, they just forget, or they can't find the record again, or something like that. So I'm going to stop there and hand over to Laura to finish off.
Thanks, Lita. I won't sing the title of this slide, you'll be pleased to hear, but you sort of get the idea from what we've said. So just a quick update on where we are today. So awards management is live across all of our 3 faculties and all of our schools. So we went big bang on this. We thought, well, we're not just going to pilot it in one part of the university, we're going to do it all. So as it stands today, we are live and people are using it, which is fantastic. There was a moment on the 1st of July, a little bit like the day we went live with Pure, where we all sort of sat there waiting for somebody to create the first application record, and then somebody did and it was all fine. So yes, we are live. As Lita has said, history and comments and notifications, I don't think we quite realised how popular that was going to be. So if you're looking at awards management, don't underestimate that. People love to be able to send messages to one another within the system, and the messaging and the tasks inbuilt are also amazing. Search and filter has been another great win for us. Our legacy system, it wasn't very easy to find the data that was in the system, whereas the search bar and the filtering abilities have been a bit of a game changer for us at Manchester. It's meant that users don't have to run a huge report to answer simple questions about how many applications have we created in a certain period, or how many awards do we have with a different institution or funder. You can actually do that through filtering. So that's been a real big change as well. So again, anybody thinking about awards management, I wouldn't say just think about the reporting module, think also about how you can maybe change practice through search and filtering as well. And again, as Lita's just touched on, it's sort of changed our user base and expanded it really, which is great, but it's also more users for us to support. So as well as our sort of traditional research services user base, we're currently working on upskilling colleagues in our postgraduate research teams in our faculties, also in our business engagement teams to also work with awards management in Pure. So that will be a complete change for us at Manchester. So I would say that we've done a lot in the last couple of months, but there's still an awful lot that we can do with awards management, and I think that's one of the most interesting aspects of the module. And finally, a thank you, and happy to answer any questions if any have come in. Thank you.
Oh.
Again, thank you, Laura and Lita. Thank you for your interesting presentation. I'll try to unmute myself next time. It's a learning curve for all. We have some questions coming in. We have about 2 minutes to go through them, so I'll pick wisely. People here are asking, so you are using Pure to add the contracts to Pure, but you're not using it as such for the negotiations. Is that correct? And how do you do the negotiations for the contract? Are they outside of Pure, and what do you use?
So I don't know what people mean by the negotiation. So I mean, our contracts managers use email, and they use, they're negotiating with external parties. So they use the normal communications tools that you might do. So we're not monitoring in that way. It's not a CRM. So we're not doing it as tightly as a CRM. But what we have done is improve on what we did have, which was nothing in a system at all, other than a record at the end of the negotiation when it was completed. So yeah, we just, I'm not sure that university research contracts lend themselves to that kind of CRM type activity, but it's different for other users. So
I found the same thing at our university. So I have another question coming in. Have you seen any resistance with the implementation of the award management module towards the people who have to use it? And how did you tackle those? people more
we
difficult
literally
to...
didn't see any resistance, did we,
Okay.
Laura?
No, I think what we've tried to do is acknowledge what a big change it is for users, and I guess we spent quite a lot of the summer and autumn period really trying to think outside the box in terms of how we give additional support to those users. So I don't think we've seen resistance, because I'd like to think that we've tried to bring those users with us, acknowledging that it's such a big change and really trying to think about other ways to support them. We do a lot of online drop-ins and things like that where they can come to us with problems.
I'll just quickly interject with the last 2 seconds. We don't make academics create the applications and awards themselves. We do it for them, and that's a win.
Okay, that's our time for this session. Thank you so much to the both of you for this interesting presentation.